Welcome one and all. It's time for yet another red hot, spicy, tingling Kings of War tournament report. 2 in 2 weeks. So I signed up for this one kind of at the last minute, on a whim. I decided, you know what, I can actually make it there. And it required me getting a coach and then a bus to get there about 5 minutes late. So that was fine. And this took place in Hinckley at Black Dragon Miniatures. 2,000 points, 4 games in one day, and Black Dragon usually achieve that by shaving off the possibility of turn 7, so no turn 7s in any of the games at all. And a lot of tournaments you'll see, if they're one-dayers these days, try to do 3 games in a day. Very few stick to the old formula of 4 in a day. However, 4 games, let's do it. And the Abyssal Dwarfs are back, as you can see from the thumbnail. And I've got my list in front of me, so while I'm going through my list, you can have a look at this shot of the opening of Game 1. So, in my list, we've got Mr. Giant Arrow here to point to the various units. We have got 2 troops of gargoyles, and this is the first time I've been to a tournament while I've had 2 troops of gargoyles and 3 golem hordes all painted, which I think are some of the most powerful units in the Abyssal Dwarf army. The Lesser Obsidian Golem Hordes, compared to other similarly priced units, I think you get a lot of survivability. The Dash 17 Defense 6+, very nice, and then combining Crushing 2 with Vicious, I think is a really good combo as well, because you're going to be fighting a lot of things that are Defense 4 in this game. So that means you're wounding on 2s, rerolling 1s. So there will be occasions where you just pick up all your wound rolls. It happens quite frequently, in fact. So I like the Vicious combo with the Crushing 2. So I just think they're a really, really powerful unit. Even against Defense 5 stuff, 3s to wound, re-rolling 1s is really good as well. Just not quite as automatic. So, 2 gargoyles, we've got the 3 golem hordes. None of them have a Charnox, even though one of them actually has it represented in the unit. That's just there for decoration. So, what do I think of the Charnox? I think it's a bit expensive of an upgrade, but if you've got the points to spare, then I can definitely see value in it. If you're taking a Surge heavy list, then definitely worth considering the Charnox on at least one of the hordes. But I think with my list, I've only got 1 Surge caster, and he's really going to be using that for kind of utility purposes to get me into better positions, and also using him for inspiring rather than trying to engineer a situation where I can shoot first and then surge in. Ideally, I don't want to be surging at all, because there's a chance, obviously, that you can fail if you're doing a few inches on the surge. We've got a Grotesque horde, and they have the only artifact in the whole army, which is the Boots of Striding. So Jesse's Boots of Striding, so once per game they just gain Strider and Pathfinder, because they are quite reliant on their Thunderous Charge to do damage. They have Thunderous Charge 2, Crush 1, and also they only hit on 4s, so if they become hindered, suddenly they're not quite as tasty. And they're very robust as well with the Nerve 16, 18, Defense 5. So there isn't anything in this list that is feeble apart from the gargoyles, and that's just their job. And I think they're some of the best chaff in the game for only 85 points. I compare them to the Night Stalker chaff, where you're paying over 100 points for things like Shadow Hounds, which can maybe hit a little bit harder, but obviously they don't fly. Then we've got a Greater Obsidian Golem, of course. Just a good addition, more expensive than the Hordes, less attacks, but it has Crushing 3, which is more useful in certain situations, and it has Strider as well. So usually you want something with Strider or Pathfinder in your list, because you're going to face some terrain that's going to hinder you, so you can line up those units in front of the terrain. And as you can see in this game, I've got my 2 units that can ignore potentially this wall on this left hand side, because that's the main piece of difficult terrain I'm going to be going through, so I've got them over here. We've then got an Ironcaster, who is hiding down here between the golems and the gargoyles, right there. And he's only got Surge, no other spells. Surge has replaced Fireball, just trying to keep him as cheap as possible, because I also wanted to fit in this bad boy, the Hexcaster. So, What I'm going for with this army is to have a really impenetrable front line of all this defense 6 high nerve unwaverable stuff. So what I'd like to do is, because they don't have a lot of speed, any of these 4 units, this guy's 6, the others are 5, I'm quite often not going to be dictating when the fighting starts in the centre. So what I would like to do is use weakness from the Hexcaster onto the most dangerous unit that's likely to hit me, and weakened going up against defense 6, even powerful units can struggle with that. Particularly units that maybe have a lot of attacks but only have crush 1, there are things like that in the game, and anything that has crush 2 but doesn't have that many attacks, so things like trolls, suddenly they're down to crush 1 when they're hitting this defense 6 wall, and they're not going to be nearly as tasty. And he's also got the Hex spell as well, which is good for long range and for taking the enemy casters out of the game slightly. We have got Susan as well, who is here behind the Greater Golem. I don't really like going into a game with Abyssal Dwarves without Susan. I know she's not necessarily the most popular choice, but I always find her incredibly useful. She's one of the few solo flying characters that I can think of off the top of my head that can actually take some strong units one-on-one. So there have been occasions in the past where she's taken on massive units of chariots, or in this list I'm looking at things like Ogre Boomers. Susan has actually got a decent chance against a unit like that. It might take her 2 turns to take them down. Potentially she could do it in 2 turns, because they're very unlikely to kill her with their first round of attacks. So she is actually a big threat to any units like that. If you want to stop someone shooting, quite often with ogres, if you put chaff into their shooting units, then the chaff is going to die immediately because the things that are shooting you are still ogres. So they're still pretty tough in combat as well. But Susan is survivable enough so that she can do that job. So ogre shooters or boomers are a good target for her, I think. Also, any kind of knights as well, because you can take away their thunderous charge by hitting them first. And if they're relying on that to do damage, they're probably not going to get through her on the counter charge as well. And generally she's faster than knights. Then we've got an Overmaster on Ancient Winged Halfbreed over there, who again is not the most popular Abyssal Dwarf choice, but the rest of my army, the big core of it is very, very slow. I want the speed with Susan and the Overmaster, who I can use to look for flanks. And it's kind of doubly effective if you can get that working for a Surge army, because your opponent is obviously having to think about this big thing on the flank that's looking at it with a very long threat range projection. So if they start angling themselves to avoid that, suddenly that opens up options for maybe surging into their other flanks. So it gives them way more to think about than usual with a big flyer. Most armies, whatever you're looking at is exactly how they're going to attack you. But with a Surge army, of course, they can change the angle of approach. So I quite like it as a combo, even though it's expensive and it's probably not as good as some of the other flyers in the game. But it does have regeneration with 17, 19, defense 5, so it's fairly survivable as well. It's 300 points, so it's the most expensive thing in the list. But speed 10, only has 9 attacks, so it's not likely to just kill something charging into the front of it. So you want to look for the flanks, or if you're going into the front, then you want to be using it to block a unit that's not going to kill you in retaliation while everything else moves up, perhaps. But in general, it's more of a threat than anything. And that is the entire list. So 2,000 points. Let's go through my opponent's ogre list for the round 1. So we've got an ogre hunter horde. So this is a unit with crushing 1 and melee 3+. So when I look at a unit like this with crush 1, I think, they're going to really struggle if they get weakened. They've got the Brew of Haste on them, so they're up to speed 8. They're already quite fast. They're actually faster than Grotesques now. There are 3 Boomer Hordes, which with the Crush 1 and Piercing 1, so whatever they're doing, they're always going to be having that little bit of bonus against the high defense. But in general, I think I'm fairly well equipped to deal with Boomers. I'd be more concerned about Shooters. I could still get to them with maybe Susan, but they're so far away that if she doesn't do the job, I'm not going to get support there for a while. So Ogre Shooters would worry this list, because of course they have Piercing 2. And I've got no way to get my Golem's wounds back, so if you start wounding them, suddenly they're in danger. So boomers I'm not as concerned about. If they're able to concentrate their fire, 3 hordes will certainly delete almost anything. So gonna have to deny them that opportunity. There is the big deal, Mammoth, which is really powerful actually. 12 attacks, dash 18, defense 5, and it has a lot of special rules. So Brutal 2, and can also give Brutal 2 to another Ogre unit nearby. Rush 2, Thunderous 2, so it's going to be wounding all my defense 6 stuff on 2s if it gets the charge in, so that's potentially an important one to block. It's got Rampage, which isn't going to be a factor particularly against my army. I've got mostly big stuff, so Slayer would be scarier, and it's very inspiring as well. There's Crocodog, which is, I think, a very, very powerful unit in this game, just because it doesn't play the game by the same rules as everyone else. And that's because it has the Through the Legs ability, where it can charge through Ogre units. So it's very rare in Kings of War, actually, you get a unit that doesn't behave like other units do in the game, and kind of breaks the rules, but this is one of them. It's generally a system where you look at a unit and you know what it does, whereas the Crocodog, with that one unique rule that only it has, is something that's very different, and you have to be aware of it. It also has quite a long charge range as well, because it's got Wild Charge D3 plus 1, so potentially a good distance on that. 2 Red Goblin Slashers, who are kind of big monsters with a bit of a shooting attack, sharp stick thrower on them, which is piercing 2, so potentially some dangerous shooting for my army to face there. And 2 Ogre Warlocks. Ogre Warlocks I'm usually concerned about because of Drain Life. Drain Life not as effective against Defense 6, but usually when I'm facing Ogres, that's the first thing I look for. Do they have Drain Life? And that's what usually terrifies me, because of course you can cast it into combat and do damage to things before you actually hit them. And they get bonus dice for their spells from being near Ogre units as well. So, 2,000 points, 10 units, which I think is 1 less than me. I've got slightly more unit strength. And the first scenario is... what's this one even called? You know what, I can't remember what the name of the scenario is. Let me get the book out, because there's a few very similar scenarios, and they obviously have different names, so let's see if I can remember. I can remember the names of some of the other scenarios that we played. I think this one just looks like a standard loot to me, but I'm going to check in the book here if I can actually find the right page. If anyone's watching this who was actually at the tournament and can remember if this was just loot, then let me know. Let's see. Yeah, it must just be standard loot, because they're just placed along the centre line. And then the others have to be placed 12 inches apart and not within 3 inches of the blocking terrain. So yeah, I think it's just a standard loot. So what you want to do is pick up those loot counters on your units and just hold on to them. So very straightforward, nothing too complicated at all. So there's 1 over here and 2 on this side. So this is where the bulk of the forces are positioned. I, however, have got a couple of powerful units out on this side with this token in mind. And I've also, this unit of gargoyles, their actual mission is to relocate over to this side and take that one. Over here, these golems may well end up pushing inwards. The Overmaster is probably going to go up there, maybe pick up the token, and maybe start moving in, and if it sees an opportunity for a flank charge, it can of course drop the token and then just swoop into combat, and then these gargoyles will come and pick it up. So that is the unit that I would ideally like to end with that token. I've got this bit of terrain. There's actually 2 big blocking pieces of impassable terrain here. So what I'm thinking is I can kind of use that to my advantage, because the enemy is going to be kind of limited coming through the gaps, and I'm not going to get flanked by anything on this side with my golems. So I can use that to protect their flank, and it gives a bit of cover for this guy to sneak up there as well. I think I chose this side because I didn't want to be limited by all these trees and these 2 big pieces of blocking impassable terrain. So there's some boomers out on this side, 2 hordes of them. The other boomer horde is there. So I'm immediately quite pleased that they're not all together, because it means they're not going to be concentrating all their fire on 1 unit probably. The hunters are here, I think. And there's the slashers. The big deal is there. You can see its tusks poking up. So yeah, there we go. There's the big deal. So brew of haste on the hunters, and boomers, slashers. So I've got these really tough units. I've got the grotesques behind because I don't want them being charged. I want them getting the charge because they really need it. And I've got these two units lined up with all the annoying terrain. And on this side, as I was describing before, that one token. So the enemy get the choice and go first, I think. Or actually, I might have made my opponent go first. I think I would have... Actually, I'm not sure. No, maybe I would have gone first given the choice because I would have wanted to get closer to the tokens. I think my opponent chose to go first and picked up this one. We've got the legendary Lazy Pirate and the fellow legendary Kings of War community Andy in there. Good afternoon. If anyone else is watching this live, drop some comments in there. So it's just a bit of an advance for the ogres. I'm not going to be able to do much, but they have moved up onto 2 of the tokens and picked them up immediately. And I think that one, let's see. Yeah, so they've got a token, and this unit does also pick up the token, but it's not actually pictured on the unit yet, but they have picked it up. And then the small amount of shooting that goes in from the slashers does some damage to these golems. And the important thing here is that golems are never getting their wounds back. I have no healing at all. The only units that are getting their wounds back are the gargoyles, maybe, if they don't die somehow. And the Overmaster on the Ancient Winged Half-Breed, the Grotesques, and Susan have all got regeneration. But the big Defense 6 stuff does not. Grotesques take a wound as well. I think that was possibly a spell from something. So yeah, the ogres have got the tokens. Turn 1 for me. So Susan immediately goes in to this boomer horde. I would have liked to hit this one because she's slightly out of the threat range of everything else then, but I wasn't in range to hit this one, so I had to charge this unit. Gargoyles have boxed in the hunters because I want to advance up and I don't want them charging me. I don't care if anything else charges me, just don't want the hunters to. The Hexcaster tries to cast weakness on something, I think. Or I might have tried Hex on that wizard actually, but it failed anyway. So whichever spell I'd chosen, it would have failed. Now, the options were to put weakness on the boomers, for example, but then they could have just shot me. But really, if they want these slashers into combat, the boomers are going to have to charge to make space, so all 3 of these would have to go in anyway. So if I put weakness on the boomers, it might make them stand there and shoot, and maybe these guys wouldn't have been able to charge and rethink, possibly. But it failed with all the dice rolls anyway. So the hunters are blocked off, done some damage to the boomers, so they're not going to shoot. And the grotesques have moved up. The grotesques can see over the hill, so they don't need to be on it. So they're in a safe position. The only thing that could shoot them is probably that one boomer horde, which I'm not too worried about. They'll survive that. Everything else just moving up. I don't want to stand back and just get shot for the whole game and slowly get whittled down, so by the time I get into combat, there's nothing left. This unit has turned this away, and the Overmaster has just moved up next to this objective. So, if the slashers stay there, they get flank charged. Anything that charges in here, if they do a multi-charge on this unit, then the poking out unit here can probably be charged by him. So, they've got some dilemmas to think about, and I think I can actually see over this piece of terrain with the heights listed. I think at this event, all the big terrain like this was height 4, which means that the Titans can actually see over it, which is weird, I think, but the forests are at height 6, I think, so you can't see over them. So there could be limitations on what I could hit charging over the terrain because there wouldn't be enough space to land. And these gargoyles are just commencing with their part of the plan, which is to go and pick up that token. Because if I can get that one, that's not really going to be under threat, so I'll just have that one, and then I just need to take this one and ignore the other one, really. Turn 2 for the ogres. So the big deal gets into the greater golem. Where was it? So the big deal was there. Into the greater golem, which I'm okay with because it's not going to kill it in one round. And here we have the 2 slashers into this golem horde. and we have the boomers into this golem horde. And I'm quite satisfied with this. I don't think, on average, any of these are going to pulverise my units, so I think I should survive the round. And what are the slasher stats again? I could just wind back and look at the army list very quickly, and then I will come back to that. Let's have a look. So, the slasher... where's it gone? There we go, Red Goblin Slasher, Titan. So, 10 attacks, hits on 3s, with Crushing 2. No Thunderous, so they're only going to be wounding on 4s. So it's going to be 20 attacks, so you'd expect to get, what, about 13, 14 hits, let's say. And then wounding on 4s. So yeah, you probably shouldn't take out a Golem Horde in a round with 2 of them. So I think I should be alright there. And these guys have moved into position so they can shoot at the Grotesques, I think. And then onto the damage for the round. So Susan takes 3. Drain life damage, actually, from the Warlock, who then puts the damage back onto the Boomers. And then she takes more damage. The Gargoyles here got killed because the Crocodog went into them as well as the Hunters, but they did their job and bought me a turn without having to face an extra unit in combat. The Greater Golem takes some damage from the Big Deal, but doesn't do enough. 9 wounds on this unit now, but they survive. And 4 on this unit here, so they obviously live as well. Now, this flyer is actually in range of this slasher, so definitely going to take that on after we establish that it can see it. This unit I don't think is in range to join in. And so it's quite a good round, I haven't lost anything there. So I think I can do some serious damage now. Because golems, if you don't take them out, they do hit hard with that Crush 2. And we'll see what they can do. So the Gargoyles, which are these ones here, go and pick up that token, as planned. The big flyer gets in and kills the slasher with a flank charge. These golems countercharge this one. These golems countercharge the boomers and kill them. And the greater golem countercharges the big deal and puts a few wounds on it. And the grotesques charged into the boomer horde that shot at them and kill them, and then turn to face the oncoming threat. So, very good round, deleted several units, and yeah, it's looking good now. We've got 1, 2, 3 good strong units there. And what am I going to lose in retaliation? I'll probably lose this unit. They're already on 9 wounds, so even just the Crocodog maybe could finish them off if it gets lucky. But the Hunters are there as well, so they could join in. And this big guy potentially could be in danger if he takes another 7 wounds, same as last time he could be. But this guy won't have Thunderous anymore. Did I say the big deal was Crush 2, Thunderous 2? Yeah, so that is going to affect things now. And I've got this power coming in from the flank. I'm fairly satisfied. Of course, there's a chance that Susan could get killed by the boomers and then overrun into the grotesques. But she's only on 1 wound, so I'd fancy her chances to live. Turn 3. So the Hunters and the big deal go into the greater golem, so suddenly I think that's probably going to die. But I'm not as concerned about that. The Crocodog goes into the grotesques, and Slasher goes back into these guys, tries to finish them off. Susan takes some more damage, but that was from Drain Life. So yeah, when you're looking at how much damage a unit can do to you potentially, it's very easy to overlook the fact that Drain Life exists. That can really swing a combat. If your defense isn't 6, then obviously Drain Life is quite a big threat to you. So draining the life of Susan, getting her up to 4 wounds, suddenly puts her in the danger zone from being hit by a unit like this. 1 wound on her and she's not really scared. 4, and that becomes a bit scary. So they do actually get through her based on that, with 8 damage, and then they just get a good nerve roll to finish her off. So they do get it into the grotesques as well, and they don't become hindered because the Crocodog's there. So yeah, all that worked out quite nicely for the ogres there. And they delete the grotesques with 11 damage. So yeah, converted it on that side. And the greater golem goes down as well. And the big deal turns this way. So, this unit has a token. Because they killed the boomers. Yeah, the boomers here that were carrying it. So, let's have a look. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. So, this unit is going to drop the token there. They are then going to sidestep and be surged into the flank of the big deal. Because you can sidestep as long as you don't get any closer to the enemy unit that you're already within an inch of. So they can sidestep here, surge into the flank. The token that is then dropped can be picked up by this unit because they, whether they can pick it up immediately, we'll see, but at some point they'll be able to get it. If I drop it just here, this guy's obviously getting flanked into oblivion. The big guy, okay, yes, I think I remember what actually happens now. I think I charge the Overmaster into the front of the big deal or into the hunters. And then these guys move sideways, pick up the token, and then these guys charge into the flank of the slasher. So it gets all my fighter units in position here, and it passes the token along. Okay, so yeah, it's quite complicated passing the token back and forth in this turn, but you'll see how it goes. Yeah, so these units both survive. This unit is obviously getting close to death now. And onto my turns. The gargoyle's just running away with the token. That one's safe. And, okay, yeah, so we just go straight into that shot. Yeah, so I did go into the big deal. Okay, so they went into the flank of the big deal, he went into the front. These guys dropped the token, sidestepped. Wait a second. Okay, yeah, yep, I remember. So, let's go back. So, the unit that actually has the token at the moment, let's see which one it is. It is this one has a token. So, what I did was, I charged a surge, this one is the flank, this one is the front. This unit made a charge into the front, and this one went into the flank. And under the new rules, they actually moved to make space for this unit to fit into the flank. So they both charged in there. So, this unit dropped the token here. When this unit charges into the front, they slide to make space for the flank charge. They land on the token, they pick up the token. After combat, they drop it under their footprint, and then move out the way of the token with their move at the end of combat. And then this unit, with their move at the end of combat, they pivot onto the token and pick it up. So you pass the token all the way down here through that very, very complicated process. If that's not clear to anybody, then I understand that. That would be a fair reaction. So the upshot of it is that the unharmed golem unit that's furthest away from the enemy ends up with the token. And I've got all these units that just need to block off the enemy now, and I'll win the game. And not be killed by this warlock. And he says, Triple Giants against this list. Yes, Triple Giants with Slayer would be very useful against this list. That's definitely something I would be concerned about. On to turn 4 for the ogres. So, double charge boomers and hunters into these already wounded golems. So they're definitely going to die. But again, it's not a big issue. And Crocodile goes after the Overmaster, which kind of blocks him in anyway, so he can't then charge one of those units afterwards. So they die. And all I need to do is make this unit run away, not get killed by him. So he actually backs away. And the fact that he's done that gives me an idea. So, on my turn, I don't think he kills the Crocodile. These golems that are wounded charge into the hunters. I don't think I kill them though. This unit turns around and starts pondering going in this direction. And I think I might hex this guy, which keeps this unit safe for a turn. Or actually, I don't think I did hex him actually. I think I tried to put weakness on somebody. Maybe on them. Yeah, because I thought it's turn 5. If I hex him, I'm not going to attack him with anything for the rest of the game, so him doing damage to himself with Hex doesn't bother him in the slightest, because you don't take a nerve check from the damage caused by that. So, yeah, I didn't bother hexing him because it's nearly the end of the game and I'm not going to attack him. So, the ogres, the crocodile gets out of the way so that the boomers can shoot the Overmaster instead of charging, and then I think it's some lightning bolt damage maybe on these guys that are carrying the token away. So the Overmaster gets wavered, which is okay because he's still blocking them off, and this horde gets killed in retaliation by the ogre berserkers, or whatever they're called, hunters. So they only, I think they overrun only 1 inch though, so they're not really a threat. So this unit can just move over here now, and hold on, if I move them 10 inches, yeah, that might be an accidental illegal at the double move there with the golems. I don't think it actually matters because they're going to be safe from these guys anyway. But yeah, I think they should only be able to get to about here. So yeah, I think that is an illegal maneuver. So we've got the Hexcaster who hexes this guy again. And the reason I want to do it now is so he can't move. So the fact that he can't move means that he can't get round this corner to attack these guys. So I think even if they go 5 inches back to here, I think he would still struggle to cast a spell on them. So what they should have done to be legal is just turn precisely this way and just go 5 inches forward there, which makes them invisible. So yeah, it's okay. They would have still had the same effect. And then I hex him so he can't move and chase after me and cast spells. And that's how that's looking. So really they should be like here. So still out of the charge range of the hunters. Gargoyles are safe. And we're in the final turn for the ogres now. So they charge the Hexcaster, boomers, and the warlock go after this guy. And there is one wizard that's not hexed that's able to go and cast a spell on them and does another wound to them but can't get rid of them. And the Overmaster gets double wand. And the Hexcaster doesn't die either. Okay, in my turn 6. So the units with the tokens just stay where they are because they're not under threat. The Overmaster tries to kill the boomers. Doesn't do it. So that's the end of the game. So it's a win. 2 tokens to 1. And yeah, very nice. So let's go back. So I'm going to wind all the way back because I just want to check on one thing in the army list. So let's have a look. Okay, yeah. So, hunters, speed 8. Okay, so yeah, 16 inches away I would need to get to make sure they're not a threat. So let's zap back through. Okay, so let's see. So they should have got to here. So the back of the unit would have been about there. So possibly what I would have had to do is to stop them being charged by them. Because if they were still in range, obviously, then I wouldn't want to do that. I'd move them here, and then this guy, because he's wavered, he could have just sidestepped to prevent this unit from charging. So he would have still got charged. And yeah, I think that's the only difference. So yeah, I think it's still good. Okay, going on to the next game. And we're up against dwarves and halflings. So it's halflings with dwarven allies. So we have got, in the halfling side, a horde of braves, 2 regiments of edge grenadiers, 2 regiments of jugger cavalry, 2 muster captains on winged arrowlers, the formation, McSweeney's Cutthroats, so that contains a regiment with bows, and Ali McSween. And in the dwarf section there are 3 regiments of ironclad and a dwarf army standard bearer. So there is not a lot of crushing strength or piercing in this list. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, okay, they're going to struggle against my defense 6 stuff. And the scenario we're playing is... Okay, I'm going to have to look at the book, because this is one where you place 3 tokens each on the opponent's half. So it may well be raise, but I am just going to check the book to make sure that is the right name of it. Let's see. Yeah, I think it's raise. So you can contest the objectives on the side of the table that you have, but you can't control them. And you score points accumulatively throughout the game. So you can only control the 3 points on the opposite side of the table to score points, and you gain 1 point for each one. Then at the end of the game, you gain 1 point if you control the central objective. So you want to protect the 3 on your side, attack and claim the ones on the enemy side, and then at the end of the game, control this one. Okay, so not that complicated, but it sounds it. So the way we've set up here, there are 2 objectives each on this side, and then 1 each on that side. So I've put my entire army on the left. I'm going to completely ignore this side, unless an opportunity arises later, but I'm just going to allow my opponent to score that 1 point for the entire game, pretty much. I'm not going to try and threaten them too much. I'm mostly focusing over here. If I can deny these 2 and control these 2 for most of the game, then I'm going to win. And my opponent has put a lot of resources over on that side, which you might think, that's wild, there's only 2 objectives there to worry about instead of 4, but most of the units over there are fast, so there may be some logic to that if they can sweep round and sweep down the table. And I've got my Overmaster on this side, because I see that all the shooting units are in these woods. The archers and Ali McSween are all in there, but they are not really a threat to my army at all. That's just how I feel about it. So I've put a flyer there so I can swoop in and just charge them and eat them, and a golem horde who they are not going to scratch with their shooting. In the middle, the greater golem isn't really facing this way, by the way. He's actually facing forwards, but he wouldn't sit on the fence that way. Drankmaster Halflings Unpainted, yes. So this is a relatively new player to Kings of War, and has only recently started painting the army. So all the faces and hair are done, I think, or at least the faces. So there is progress being made. So I only judge people's painting progress if I see the same people like a year later and there's still no progress on it. Then I might raise an eyebrow then. But for a new player, no issues at all. Good to just get an army out on the table sometimes. Those of us with a million painted armies obviously don't have that turmoil. So, oh, by the way, if I didn't mention the scoring in this tournament, most of the scoring is purely a win, loss or draw based scoring. So I think you get 8 for a win, 4 for a draw, and 1 for a loss, I think. Something like that. And then you get another up to 4, I think. Another 4 or 5 points for kills. So it's mostly on just winning the scenario. Margin of scenario win makes no difference. So you just want to edge the scenario and kill lots of stuff to get maximum points. So in the first round I got a decent score, but not top table worthy yet. So, also we have the Halfling Horde here, who also I don't consider much of a threat to my army. Most of the stuff that I'd be worried about, we'd be looking at the Winged Arrowles, because they've got some crushing strength. The Knights have Thunderous Charge 1, which isn't that big of a deal. And in general, I'm not overly concerned about this matchup. I don't think most of the units pose that much of a threat to me. As long as I don't give them any silly flanks. Okay. Treble Giants and Treble Doggerpults I see in the comments. Interesting. Yeah, so if people are going to adjust the meta based on my Abyssal Dwarf list, that's going to be interesting. So we've got the Edge Grenadiers here. The Edge Grenadiers, even though they have a reputation as being powerful, they don't punch through Defense 6 stuff very easily. And these regiments of Ironclad are no threat at all to me, because they have no crushing, and they're very slow. So the main things I'm concerned about, the Flyers and the Knights, potentially. Especially if they can charge off a hill and get a bonus. So, turn 1. My opponent gets the choice of going first or second and chooses to go first. And you can start scoring immediately in this scenario if you happen to be able to fly right onto a token. So my opponent is going to do that. Oh, actually, no. I just lied. Yep. So I went first. And my ancient winged half-breed has immediately landed here. So extremely threatening position. Gargoyles can't quite reach the token, but they're standing there anyway. And they can't really be shot by the halflings. If the halflings want to move out and then turn and shoot them, then by all means, because then they'll be in range for me to charge them, which would be a bad idea. So more than likely they're going to stay where they are and shoot this guy, but this unit will have to move to do it, which means they'll be -1 because they do not have steady aim, these halflings apparently. And you can see this is actually a really good new player tactic here. The unit's rules are actually on little stickers behind them, which I think is a very good idea. So yeah, that was the entire turn 1, just advanced up. Susan's just on a little perch, ready to strike at something. Turn 1 for my opponent. So, these guys do turn a bit so they can see him, and they're going to be shooting. The Ironclad move up very slowly because they're dwarves and they're in difficult terrain. And the Edge Grenadiers move on to this objective and immediately start scoring it. Which I'm mostly going to ignore unless the opportunity comes up to do anything about that. We're looking at... I think my opponent was checking Susan's arc, but obviously she's individual, so it doesn't really matter. 3 damage done to the Overmaster, so we can live with that. So yeah, you can see the plan from the halflings is to swoop round on this flank. So what I'm going to do, because all these dwarves are so slow, I'm going to try and slow them down even more by charging Susan into them, because they're not much of a threat to her with no crushing strength. So Susan will try and slow them down. I'll put golems on this hill and deter these guys from coming straight at the flank. And then I'm going to push in and totally murder this area with these units, and then try and hold these 2 objectives and protect these 2. So turn 2 for me. Okay, so these guys moved forwards right to... they're actually on the hill. And then I got the laser out and determined that the Overmaster could actually see that unit. Across the forest, he can see the corner of the unit with the laser. If I didn't have a laser, then it would have been almost impossible to tell. But could just see them, which means that that flank charge is available. If they'd been like an inch further back, he wouldn't have been able to see them. So, Overmaster into the flank, gargoyles into the front. Now, I wouldn't normally throw gargoyles into combat like this, but I thought, you know what, they might actually, against a defense 4 horde, they might do a couple of wounds, which could help. And it ends up wavering the horde, which is nice. Susan makes a hindered charge into these Ironclad and does a couple of wounds. And there we go. So I've ignored these guys for now and just made a charge into that horde. So this side is looking very good. This side is where all the enemy units are, so obviously it's not looking that populous by Abyssal Dwarf standards, but it's not overly concerning. I've kept these guys out of charge range of the flyers. Turn 2, one of the flyers decides, you know what, I'm not going to take the bait and charge straight into your golems, I'm going to swoop around the back and be annoying, which is a good idea. One of them does go in, however. The Edge Grenadiers and the other one have come round the flank. Knights coming up behind. 2 units of knights coming up behind there. So suddenly the scary stuff is arriving, and the Edge Grenadiers just sitting on that token, they're going to keep scoring points. So we're keeping track of the points with these silver dice here. So my opponent's on 1 and will go up to 2 at the end of the turn. And these guys shoot at the golems and do 2 damage, which obviously isn't very scary. And these guys, I think they throw their throwing mastiff at these golems and do a wound as well. And 3 wounds from the muster captain. 2 wounds on Susan, and the other unit have turned to face her, so I'm quite happy to see that, because she's being a real distraction now. And she can actually just run away from them. So what I want to do with Susan now, even though she can't fly anymore, she's still individual, so she can still go and charge this unit here. So my opponent goes up to 2 victory points, I'm still on 0, but I'm quite confident because I'm kind of building for the later turns. Turn 3, so this is when I need to start scoring. So my golems go into Ali McSween, the Greater Obsidian Golem here has a flank on these archers and charges in there. The Overmaster does not go into the Horde again because they were so close to death. I rely on the Gargoyles and the Golem Horde to finish them off. So it was that Golem Horde and the Gargoyles here. So they double charge there. This guy swoops across to there, and I think he charges this unit. And then these Golems go in there. The Greater Golem goes into that flank. So the token is under here. So at the moment I've got 4 unit strength on it, and my opponent has 3. So I've claimed this token. I've claimed this token that's around here somewhere with my golems, so I'm going to score some points. And these golems do 5 wounds back to the Arrowles captain. The Overmaster, with this hindered charge onto the fence that he made, ends up with 5 wounds onto that regiment. And Waver. So obviously dwarves can ignore Waver sometimes, so it's not a big deal for them. Turn 3. So Ali McSween countercharges there. The archers, I think, end up countercharging here. Oh no, they can't there because I wavered that unit. Yeah, so with the flank charge, he only wavered them, which is quite funny. And I didn't kill McSween. Over here you can see this golem unit has taken 1 wound. I think that was maybe from a throwing mastiff or something. Or a wizard. Had they already taken a wound earlier? Oh yeah, they had. So no, they didn't take any more wounds. These guys... let's see, where are we? So yeah, so at the end of my turn, I get another 2 points to equalise. Now we're on to my opponent's turn. And we have this triple charge into the golems. So, let's see. I think I whizzed through too much there. Yeah, don't think I showed you Susan. Where's Susan? Did I not take a picture of Susan? Because she attacked those knights that I told you she was going to attack. Okay, there she is. So she made a hindered charge into the knights and takes away their thunderous charge. And I also put weakness on them first to try and actually kill them, because his weakness can do damage, the Hexcaster. So weakness plus Susan attack. So they are going to charge. This unit is going to charge. From this angle it doesn't even look like they can actually see them, but I think they could. I think we checked. So triple charge into the golems, and could be nasty, but this unit is weak. This guy is being annoying. He's flying around the back, ignoring my units, looking to be a threat, and the Edge Grenadiers into the Grotesques. These guys pass their headstrong roll and countercharge into the Overmaster, and the archers and McSween don't do much in there, as you'd expect. So actually, yeah, they do go up to 6 wounds, but they're not dead. Overmaster takes 4 wounds. Susan takes a few wounds. I don't think that's Waver. I think those are tokens for something else, so she's not wavered. And the golems only get up to 6 wounds. So disappointing output from the knights, but they don't have a lot of crushing. And 2 damage onto the grotesques. So it's looking quite healthy. But obviously I'm 3-2 down on points, and I need to keep scoring and denying my opponent from scoring. So, turn 4 for me. Gargoyles into the knights. These gargoyles can't, so they just block the knights. The golems finish off the muster captain. The Overmaster finishes off the dwarf regiment there. Susan, instead of killing anything else in the middle, goes for the Edge Grenadiers out on this objective, wavers them, so she should be able to kill them next turn, which will deny my opponent some points. And over here, the Greater Golem finishes off those archers, and these ones finish off Ali McSween and then overrun into this unit, so I'm keeping this token for the foreseeable future. I've still got these 2, so I score another 2 points in that round. So I take the lead again, but it's my opponent's turn again. So they turn round, and they're just going to sit on that objective for 1 more turn until I kill them. And the dwarves turn around to face this guy, and I think they might unleash their throwing mastiff at this point. The knights decide to take out both units of gargoyles. You can see the grotesques actually finished off those Edge Grenadiers and then turned round to not be threatened by the the muster captain. However, the muster captain now goes into the flank of the golems, which is quite scary, but they are inspired by the Ironcaster there. And let's see what he does. So the gargoyles die. The gargoyles die. And the golems get up to 11 wounds, but do not die. So obviously that being inspired helped there, so they hang on to life, so obviously they should be dead. So next turn, I just need to keep scoring these points, these two. So my opponent only got 1 for this round, so equalised, but the momentum is in my favour. Turn 5, so I've only got 2 more turns to score. So there's nothing for the Ironcaster to do, so I just charge it into this guy. See if I can kill him. The golems go into the flank of those knights, I think, here. And kill them. I believe it was a flank. The Overmaster flies over the top of the dwarves. Yeah, they haven't used their Mastiff yet. Flies over the top of them because what I want to do on turn 6 is go on to this objective and score another point. Susan finishes off the Edge Grenadiers on the objective, so my opponent isn't scoring that one anymore. And I just rack up 2 more points for camping on these because they finish off the archers as well. So it's looking very good. My opponent can score some more points and does have a potential rear charge with the dwarves on the golems there, but it would be hindered. So they do make it. I've taken the lead on points, by the way. And this guy decides, you know what, I need to start scoring points now, so flies onto this objective to score. These guys charge into the grotesques, so if they kill them, they would actually take that objective as well. If they don't, then I've got enough unit strength to hold it from them, because I kept these guys within 3 of it. And they do not kill them. The Mastiff gets thrown, I think, at this guy this turn. So these golems comically get double wand with a rear charge. They only took 1 more wound, so it wasn't a true double wand. I think they needed 5 to kill them. So it's still funny though. Anytime a double wand comes up. These guys put some wounds onto the grotesques but don't kill them. So my opponent is going to score a point for this round. So we're now equal on turns and I have the lead now. So the long-term strategy is paying off. And on to my turn 6, so I can build an unassailable lead here really if I score some points. The Overmaster gets onto this one. And I'm still holding the others. So yeah, I'm 4 points up now. And my opponent can't physically get to that many things to score in the final turn. So all he can do is camp on this one. And that's going to be that. I'm holding the middle because the golems who got double wand countercharge the dwarves and kill them. So I'm holding the centre. I don't think I actually am holding the centre. I think they're slightly too far away. I'm not sure. But yeah, they could have just sidestepped at the end of combat if I needed to. The grotesques kill the unit that was trying to kill them, the knights. And yeah, very healthy. Another win. Killed loads of stuff. And I think that one was a maximum points. So really good round there. 2 wins out of 2 so far, and it's going swimmingly. Now on to round 3 and some more ogres. So what have we got here? We've got more boomers. 2 hordes of them, 1 with fire oil. So they're going to get some extra punch against my regenerating units. There's a unit of Berserker Braves, so these are the ones that have 1,000,000 attacks. So even scarier than Hunters. They only hit on 4s, but 30 attacks is very scary. We've got 2 Chaff units, Red Goblin Scouts, who are good. 2 Warrior Chariot Regiments. A Red Goblin Blaster that obviously explodes when it hits you. A Sergeant Hero on a Chariot. An Ogre Warlock with Lightning Bolt, Veil of Shadow, which is pointless against me, but the Lightning Bolt isn't. And Nomagorok with Banechant, Heal and Lightning Bolt. So powerful caster there. And Cuzlo and Madfall, who's quite a good utility kind of creature with a variety of weird rules, such as an Enthrall Sticky Tongue and -1 to nerve of units, which I think can stack with the Brutal of the Ogres, so it's a good combo that. And there's the setup. So the scenario in this one is control. Now, when I hear the words ogres and control, I normally think, oh no, what chance have I possibly got? Because they've got all these, all their regular ogre heroes So you're thinking like Boomer, Boomer Sergeant, Berserker, Bullies, Nomogrok, Grokkagamok. All your ogre heroes have unit strength. So they can quite easily camp in a square of the table and score a point. They've also got the quite good Red Goblin Scouts at speed 10 who are really good for that role as well. So kind of equal to Gargoyles in that respect. They just can't fly, but they hit a bit harder. So, yeah. I'm always concerned coming into a matchup like this against ogres, because I've got some individuals that I've spent points on who obviously can't control a zone. So, based on this, I decide I'm going to try and ignore mostly these two zones here, and I'm just going to focus on trying to hold these four. So if my opponent ends up holding these two, maybe I could use Gargoyles, if I've got them alive later in the game, to swoop into an area and contest them. But I've got a lot of unit strength in my hordes, but that's really the only unit strength I have. Everything else is either 1 or nothing. So these 4 hordes need to carry the day here, and I need to kill things, so I need to be really killy in this game, because you need to be in control against ogres. It's kind of their dream scenario, I think. So, for my setup, I've got my speedy flank over here, with the Grotesques, speed 7, and the Overmaster. I've got Susan on that side, so we've got a bit of speed over there as well. And then we've got the meaty or rocky centre here with just a little bit of a gap there. Because of that wall, I don't want lesser golems on it. So, there is the meat. If I can fight mostly here, or kind of this sort of area here, I mean. So, if most of the fight takes place on that spot, that means that from that area, I can potentially control all 4 zones if it goes well. From that exact spot, you only have to be a little bit in either direction. So that's a key area. Also, over here would be a key area, but I'm not worried about that side particularly. So it's mostly here is the main point of interest for me. What I want to do, because the ogres have got chariots that are going to be faster than me, I want to move up, let them charge me probably, but I want to cast weakness on them first, so they're way less likely to punch through my lines, and then I hit back and massacre them. That's the plan. So, and limit what they can do on the charge with positioning, obviously, and use Gargoyles to prevent certain multi-charges if I feel that they're imminent. So my opponent has protected the Berserkers there. There's both the Boomers, who obviously combined are much more powerful than on their own, and combined with spellcasting. There's no Drain Life in this list. And I asked my opponent about that, and he said that it was because most of this stuff is defense 4. So draining life doesn't actually help them that much because it's so easy to take the wounds back off them again. So no drain life, which I like the sound of, and also lots of defense 4 is also music to my ears because lots of my stuff is going to be wounding it on 2s, rerolling 1s. So most of my army will be doing that. So turn 1. The ogres go first, but they don't move up very far. It's not a particularly vast advance. They just get into range to do some spells and waver my gargoyles with a lightning bolt from the hill. So that's kind of annoying to be a gargoyle. Turn 1 for me. Susan decides not to charge anyone yet. I'm not sure if she actually could. Yeah, she's behind the forest, so she actually flies here. So she's looking down the flank of the enemy, which obviously she's an individual, so she wouldn't get any bonus for that. But maybe it's going to make my opponent think twice about what they do. Maybe these guys would stay here to block her line of sight, in which case she would charge and kill them and get rid of the chaff in a scoring unit. So in this scenario, it's all about just picking off those units that can score when you can. Turn 2 for the ogres. Nice cinematic shot there. So they decide to ignore Susan and just go into the difficult terrain, which I'm kind of pleased about because I feel like I've got a turn to ignore them now, because they're not going to be any threat to me on the charge from that position. So I can ignore them for 1 turn. Everyone else just moves up a bit. They actually move backwards on this flank to get out of charge range of the Overmaster. So very cagey over there. A bit more aggressive in the middle because they want to shoot with the Boomers. And they put 6 wounds onto this horde. So, a bit of effective shooting there. I'm going to keep pushing up. Turn 2. I push up. And the ogre unit, the golem unit that's already wounded, I park the gargoyles in front. because I do not want to get double charged by ogres on a unit that's got 6 wounds on it, because that would kill it. So instead, the gargoyles are in front, so only one unit could charge into here, if they're lucky. I'm not even sure if they could with the angles involved. The only thing that could hit them would be this unit with a hindered flank charge. They wouldn't get their thunderous charge and they'd be hitting on 5s, so they probably wouldn't do anything. So I think what they end up doing is going behind to get a better shot for next turn. So protecting these ones. Anything that's going to get double charged, it would be these two. And I think it's only them really, because I think they might be in the flank and they can't hit the flank because I've got all my units perfectly aligned there. Susan goes after one of the boomer hordes, because she just is good at that, and puts 5 wounds onto them. So that means that they can't shoot me next turn, that unit. So their shooting is going to be limited if they decide not to engage next turn. And I've moved everyone else up a little bit. I get within 20 inches so I can charge things, and they might back away again, but we'll see. Turn 3, so the ogres go in. We've got chariots and a boomer regiment go into these golems. And these boomers that were wounded by Susan go into the gargoyles to try and get rid of my scoring chaff. And they reposition themselves down here, the Red Goblin Scouts, ready for a rear attack. So, and what damage is done? Oh yeah, Susan takes a bit of lightning bolt damage. So, these golems get up to 11 damage. You can see that Bane Chant was cast, and I failed to cast weakness on them in the previous turn, by the way. So they were wounding on 2s. So they do good damage. And with their brutal, it's effectively on 12, so they needed to roll 5 twice to kill the unit. And they did not. So on the inspired roll, they failed. So these golems cling on to life. The value of inspired, everybody. The gargoyles die, of course. And because of that, this is not going to end well for the ogres. So, what have I got that I can do here? Susan can go after these boomers who are already heavily wounded on 5. She might actually kill them. Even if she doesn't, then there's not much else for her to do anyway. These golems are in the flank of these boomers, so they can charge the flank. These golems and the greater golem can charge into the chariots here. So they should die from the flank charge. This unit should die from that double charge. And it's going to be painful for the ogres because of this failure here. When you hit the Abyssal Dwarf front line, if you don't kill something, bad things usually happen. Over on this side, they're still being very conservative, the ogres, not really pushing in. Turn 3 for me. So, this is a bit of luck. The Hexcaster decides there's no one I can really see to cast anything on, so I'll just pop out back here and cast weakness on the cavalry, because that'll take away their thunderous charge, and also it'll do damage to them, but it actually wavers them. So that's great. And yeah, 2 dead units, and Susan gets into them. Now, you may think I'm not protecting this unit's flank, potentially. I'm not sure whether they could actually get there. But even if they can, I'm not concerned, because the next thing that hits this unit, they die anyway, because they're already on 11 wounds. So anything that hits them in the front or flank, they still die. And they can't get their wounds back at all. So Susan is the only thing that doesn't succeed to kill in the middle. She does for 5 more wounds though, but can't get rid of them. So that unit's dead, that unit's dead. The Ogre Centre has gone. However, still they've got a lot of scoring units left. So scenario-wise, it's still very close. Also, I've moved these gargoyles out in front of the chariots to block them in, because I want to advance and be aggressive now. I decided I was going to kill things in the middle. I want to push everything in and capitalise on my advantage now. So, turn 4 for the ogres. Cuslow and the character on chariot charge into the grotesques. The Red Goblin Scouts go into the golem horde. The blaster goes into the wounded golems to finish them off. Ideally, you'd want the blaster to go into something that's not got that many wounds on it, because it can do quite a lot of damage. So you'd probably prefer it to go for that unit, but I don't think it could hit them. Let's go back. Yeah, I remember we were checking the angles involved to see if it could hit this unit, and with a single pivot we determined that it couldn't actually get them. So it had to go for this unit. So it's definitely going to kill them. Boomers into this horde. It's already on 6, so there's some potential there that they could die. They only take 2, and they don't die. This horde does die, but obviously that gets removed as well now. So, it's still looking quite good. You can see a human hand measuring arcs there of the chariots behind. So on this side, the chariots and the berserkers are waiting to strike. These guys take 2 wounds from the Red Goblin Scouts. They take 6 from this combined assault. So, what is my plan now? Well, that is a really scary unit. This is a unit that's been held back. However, they are in charge range of the Greater Obsidian Golem and the Overmaster. So they are both going to charge into the front of this unit. They're both in the front. They're going to kill that unit, presumably, and then they're going to turn around and threaten this whole arc here. This side is looking okay, because the golems are definitely going to kill these boomers, because Susan's there as well, and that's if Susan actually bothers to join in. She could attack something else. Turn 4 for me, so I do kill them, and Susan kills the Red Goblin Scouts that were already on 1 damage. She doesn't actually do much damage to them, I think, but she does get a good nerve roll to finish them off. So 2 ogre units down there. These guys do finish off the Goblin Scouts on the hill. The Grotesques do not kill off Cuzlo, but they do 5 wounds. And these 2 Titans do kill off the Chariots, and now they're in a really threatening position. So it's looking quite bad for the Ogres at the moment. In terms of scoring, not that horrific, because these 2 could run off and score some zones, and I might not be able to catch them. So, the issue is, whichever zone they go into, the Golems can follow them into one of them and take it off them, because they're worth more. So, Turn 5 for the Ogres. So Mhorgoth and the Warlock try and finish off this unit of Golems instead of running away. They decide that's the best choice because then I've got nothing to score with on this side of the table. Everyone into the Grotesques, including the Berserkers. So the Mhorgoth and the Warlock do 0 damage to the Golems, which is slightly against the odds. They should do 1 at least. Grotesques are dead. And they turn to face. So I just need to be killing things now, and my opponent isn't going to have much left to score with. So what can I do? I can hit the flank of the chariot character. I can take out one of them with the golems. Susan can't charge them because she can't see them, but she can get in a position to charge them next turn. And turn 5. So I only wave a Mhorgoth. I obviously kill the hero on the chariot with the flank charge, and the Overmaster charges into the berserkers on the front, so ends up on this side. Now the berserkers can flank charge the Overmaster after that, but I wanted to preserve this unit, and I think the best way to do that was to charge this guy in there to block in, because they're worth a lot more unit strength than the Overmaster. So if the Overmaster gets killed, I'm not too concerned. Turn 6. So the Overmaster is going to get flanked, and it's the last turn as well, so I need to protect them for 1 turn. This guy runs away to get out of arc, the Warlock, but he can't actually reach this table section. He's still stuck in my centre, I think. The Golems get hit by Cuzlo and take some wounds. The Overmaster gets killed with that many wounds on him, and they reposition. So, turn 6 for me. Kill Mhorgoth. Don't kill the Warlock with Susan, and I kill Cuzlo. So, I think all my units are actually in this quarter here, so I take this one as well. So, I'm not sure, I can't remember if he was actually in this section. So if he is, then it's 1, 1, and then I own this one. I also had the option of falling back with the Greater Golem into this section, which would have meant that I own this one and this one. My opponent owns this one, and that one's a tie. So whatever happens, I've got more than enough to win. So it's a win, it's a bloodbath, there's a lot of things dead. I actually ended up with a decent amount alive points-wise, actually, because none of my heroes got attacked. Because obviously this scenario, you want to focus on the things that can score. And I think I did a good job killing things there. Obviously you need a little bit of luck, and the 1 unit of golems surviving that first attack from the ogres was very nice. So 3 wins out of 3 going into round 4, the final round, and we're up against the Forces of the Abyss. And I'm reliably informed that this exact player and list finished last at a recent event. So on the top table, obviously doing something right this time, 2 troops of Succubi, who are... They're alright, but against my list they're not going to do too much damage. They're maybe more of a roadblock because they've got Ensnare. They don't have very high nerve or defense though. 2 regiments of Flame Bearers. They're some decent shooting with Piercing 1 on it. Gargoyle Troop, Tortured Souls, who have Crush 1, Thunderous Charge 1, but only 9 attacks, so they're not that big of a threat, but maybe a little. Cronius, who is definitely a danger, and I'm going to try and focus in on dealing with him, because he's got Cloak of Death, which is definitely more effective against Defense 6, because normally you have to work hard to do wounds against high defense units. Cloak of Death, you just have to walk near them and they take damage. So Cloak of Death, really good against high defense armies. There's also got Crushing Strength 3, which is obviously very good, with D6 plus 6 attacks, so potentially this is a unit I'm watching out for. Abyssal Fiend has Crushing Strength 2 as well, so that's potentially quite nasty, and a bit of Fireball. And Zuzuzu the Betrayer, who has a Bane Chant and Lightning Bolt. So Bane Chant obviously very helpful against my army. And there's Bael, who is a spellcaster slash fighty big demon monster, who has Lightning Bolt 7 and Crushing Strength 2 and Brutal. So potentially quite spicy. So, onto the game, and this is, it's not Smoke and Mirrors, it's the other one, Fool's Gold. Okay, so you take it in turns putting down tokens, secretly, they have secret values under them, they either have 0, 2 or 1 victory points, and at the end of turn 3, you flip them all over and find out what you're actually fighting over. So, you put them down on your opponent's half, so I've put one here, 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 and because I think it's 5 each you put down. There must be another one either there or maybe there. My opponent's got one here, 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 and I can't see where the other one is, but we'll see in a minute. So what I've done is I've put all my zeros over on that side, I think. So all my tokens that I want to go for that are worth anything are over on this side. I think that's the 2 right there. So it's kind of a bluff for me because I've not put anything directly staring at that expensive token. So we'll see if my opponent thinks that that's not worth anything. And also I'm going to point out that when I was going through the pictures I did spot 2 hideous illegal moves that I do during this game. But thankfully, I think based on my calculations, they don't affect the outcome. So very fortunate there, but obviously whenever I spot something like that in a game, I'm kind of poring over it thinking, did this actually affect the outcome? Because most people aren't taking photos of all their games and analysing them afterwards. So for most people it would just slide and that's it. But obviously if I make a mistake, then I'm broadcasting it out to the world, unless I like carefully cut around it, which I don't really want to do. Because I'd rather be transparent with my games and teach people what not to do wrong in situations. So we've got a nice cinematic shot here. And my main line of attack, I've got my 4 really tough units all right next to each other, the grotesques on the end. So if we go back to the wide shot, there's a big gathering of objectives in this kind of area. So I want to be fighting kind of here, mostly. So we can contest all this when we see what they're worth at the end. I know this one's worth 2 because I put it down. That's worth 1, I think. There's a 0 over here. That one might be 0. So I've got my Overmaster there to threaten, and these units aren't that fast. So he's just going to hide from them. He can even go into the woods to avoid taking much damage from the fireball. There's Cronius, the guy I'm mostly worried about. And there is yeah, there's another page to this army list that I don't think I've got a picture of, but there's a horde of Abyssals. There's a horde and maybe 2 regiments of lower Abyssals as well, maybe 1 regiment, maybe 2, but they explode when you hit them. I think it's just 1, possibly, might be there. So they do damage to you when you kill them. So, got Susan out on this flank. So Gargoyles, Tortured Souls and Bael So lots of flying stuff, but they're not all speed 10, which is important. We've got the Flame Bearers and the... what's that guy called? The kind of chubby spellcaster. That might be on the back as well. But it's the one... I've played against it before. It's got a lightning bolt or something. Or it might be fire bolts as well. So it usually just hangs out with these guys and shoots with them. And then there's some Succubi in the front there. Succubi here in front of the Horde. Cronius. And that would be the Fiend there. So, turn 1. The Abyssals go first and push up. Because of their positioning though, I am quite happy with how this looks. Because I can charge into the Gargoyles with Susan and not be threatened by Bael. And Susan will definitely survive a round of attacks from Tortured Souls, and because she's individual, she can probably then just get away from them quite easily and not be killed by them. So I think Susan has got a good shot to disrupt this flank. In the middle, the Flame Bearers would like to get in position to shoot, but I think they do a bit in round 1. It might be the Wizard actually with Lightning Bolt at that range. So the Hexcaster, who is sitting in there, takes 3 wounds. Susan takes 2 wounds from shooting. The Hexcaster immediately dies on 3 damage. Wow. He was actually inspired as well by the Ironcaster, but still dies on 3 wounds. So that's not a great start. 2 really good nerve rolls to kill off the Hexcaster, because he's nerve, he's dash 11, so you have to roll 8 twice to kill him with that. So he's gone. Turn 1 for me. Susan goes in there and does some wounds to the Gargoyles. Doesn't kill them though, comically. But the Tortured Souls can't see over the Gargoyles because they're the same height, so she can't actually be double charged. Okay, then there's not much other action going on. The Overmaster is just staying out of range of the fireball. I've put my Greater Golem up into the woods. The Grotesques aren't in the woods yet, so they can't be charged. I am kind of inviting something. For example, Cronius. I'm not sure if I'm out of his charge range or not, but I think I've put myself just in his charge range, inviting him in. Because if he only gets 1 hit in during the game and then I flank him, that's the dream. He's out of the game then. He's a big threat, so I'm trying to tempt him in, because he's not going to kill me in 1 hit. Turn 2. So the Gargoyles don't really do anything, but Bael turns to face Susan and then I think throws a lightning bolt at her in a minute. The Flame Bearers are going to be shooting me. We've got Bad Squiddo in there. By the way, if anyone's not checked out the Bad Squiddo My Last Sunrise 2 Kickstarter, it ends today, so last chance to jump on that if you want to get some Women of Horror, or in fact a Turkey Man, which is what I've already painted one of the samples of Turkey Man, which you may have seen on social media. So nice miniatures on there to check out. So what happens here? Cronius actually decides not to charge me, and there's a bit of damage done, but not much to the golems. 1 damage, 2 damage. Susan takes a little bit of damage there, but she's not scared. And because of the positions of these units now, she knows that if she goes in there again, kills them, charges through, then she's going to be out of everyone's arc and only get a bit of lightning bolt on her probably. So, quite happy. My opponent being very cagey. Turn 2 for me, so Susan does kill the Gargoyles and overruns, so she's not getting charged, and you can see she regenerated a wound or 2 there. How many was she on? 3, so she just got 1 wound back. My Gargoyles have boxed in Cronius because I'm pushing up now. I do not want Cronius to get in on me with a double charge with any other unit, because he is actually a big threat, especially with the Cloak of Death as well. So, boxing in Cronius because I'm pushing everyone forward. And the Overmaster goes into the woods so that if they want to fireball him, there's going to be cover. And of course he can charge out of woods with flyers and not be hindered. So, putting him in a threatening position. And I actually managed to get something very good with this flyer in a minute, which you'll see shortly. Turn 3 for the Abyssals, so Cronius is going to kill the Gargoyles, get them out of the way. This guy, I can't remember what this guy is. Some kind of evil demon monster goes into the Greater Golem. The Succubi go into the golem horde. Susan is kind of left alone. They're just ignoring Susan now. So the tortured souls go down here. Baal looking into my flanks. So I'm going to have to do something about that. And then next, these guys start moving. I think they actually all move backwards because they don't want to get charged yet. So they move backwards and then they shoot, and they do 3 wounds to the golem horde. So Baal actually lightning bolted my gargoyles off the table, so they're dead. 2 wounds from fireball onto the Overmaster. And then Cronius kills the gargoyles, and fatally for Cronius, backs up. So Cronius, I don't know if he's in that much danger here, if he stays there. But as soon as he backs up, what he opens up is... Succubi don't do anything there. What he opens up is that I can now see him with the Overmaster. So if he was here, I can't see him because the woods are too high. But the Overmaster, now that he's backed up, I've got a potential flank charge into Cronius. And that's my one chance to take down the unit that I was most scared of in this army. So, on average, it's very dicey whether you actually kill Cronius with a flank charge with an Overmaster. Because I think having Vicious just about pushes it into should probably just about succeed territory. So, I'm definitely going to try it, because I think that's too good an opportunity to waste. So, in my turn, turn 3, my golems go into the Tortured Souls flank with a surge, and then double one them. Which is not the best outcome. Susan is flying behind enemy lines now because she wants to... there's nothing she wanted to charge right now, so she just wanted to get into a position where she can hit something later, and she can go for the Flame Bearers next turn. In the centre, the golems take out the... which unit was it that was there? Do I kill the Succubi? I think so. Yeah, and the Greater Golem doesn't kill this guy. The Grotesques move up into the woods, and the Overmaster kills Cronius with the flank attack. So that is nice. Bad Squiddo. I like that you have a small arrow within the big arrow. That is a weird broadcasting software bug or something, because it doesn't actually appear on my own computer, the small arrow. The small arrow is only there on the broadcast. So that's a very weird little quirk of open broadcast software. So the Overmaster kills and then turns around to get all these guys in the front. So I think that is a really important move, getting rid of Cronius. And the Grotesques are in this difficult terrain, so they will get cover as well if they get shot by Fireball, I think. And that double one is obviously hilarious, but this unit of Tortured Souls are actually devastated now. So if they want to hit me again throughout the game, they're going to be down to 4 attacks, I think, which is really pitiful. So, turn 4 for the Abyssals. So the Fiend comes out, and the Horde here, the Succubi decide to move away into the woods, and then the Horde of Abyssals go into the Overmaster. Flame Bearers, I think, continue backing up and shooting. And Baal jumps over the top of my golems and lands there. And the Tortured Souls have moved down here with their devastation on them, because they don't want to get scratched by anything else for the rest of the game, or they just die. And what I'm thinking immediately here is, ooh, he's landed right there. I could turn these golems round, and then I think I would need about 3 inches on the surge out of 8. So on average, I can surge into the rear of Baal, kill him, and then I've got this side totally sewn up, I think. However, Baal lightning bolts the Ironcaster, does 2 wounds, and then manages to roll a 9 to waver him. So very impressive nerve rolls from the Abyssals so far, and that means I can't do that plan anymore. So I can't do that. And however, you'll notice we've revealed the tokens now. So let's go back to this moment. So you can see 2-point objectives are very close together here. There's a 1 out on the right flank, 1 there, and a 1 there, and a 1 there. So all the 1s on this side, the 2s here, and a 1 out on the flank. So we got rid of all the 0s, so they're not taking up space, but very interesting. Okay, on to 1 damage done to the grotesques. And not much damage done here. The Overmaster takes some wounds though in combat, but he's got regeneration. On to my 4. So, the golems decide, well, we can't really do anything right now, we can't be surged, so we're just going to move a little bit this way. Not really anything for them to do that's interesting, so not doing anything. Golem horde into the unit of flame bearers here, kill them. Susan into the other one, doesn't kill them. The Overmaster into this horde again, regenerates quite a lot of wounds this turn, and does some more damage to them. Grotesques into the Succubi. These guys killed the unit that they were fighting as well. However, I double won the Succubus unit, so another double 1 in this game. So my nerve rolls are really not coming through. The universe is trying to conspire against me. It doesn't want me to win a tournament. However, I think going into this game, I had a pretty good lead because there was nobody else on 3 wins. And I had big wins as well. So I think I really just needed a draw from this game to win the tournament. So we'll see if I can achieve it. So there's how it's looking right now. And you're going to notice, actually it's not this turn, next turn. My next turn you'll notice a move that's not legal. So, this unit got wavered, by the way, by Susan, so they're kind of stuck. However, because the grotesques double 1 of the Succubi, they're going to get flanked now. So, the Abyssals and the Fiend into the flank. And over here the Tortured Souls are just kind of looking for a juicy target. The Jankmaster says, do you think he was baiting the Overmaster thinking he'd survive the charge? I don't know. I don't think the odds of surviving the Overmaster's flank charge were good enough for it to be bait. I think Cronius was in big trouble with that charge. Let's work it out. So, what is the nerve of Cronius? I think it's like -18. Seems to be too clever to make that mistake of backing into a clear charge. Well, I don't know. Sometimes people just don't spot these things, because flyers are so far away, it sometimes doesn't enter your thought process. It's definitely happened to me before. So, I'm trying to find the Abyssal list here. Okay, where is Cronius? Let's see. I'm pretty sure he's -18, defense 5. So, hold on, I just had the page there. Where's it gone now? Abyssals, Abyssals, Abyssals. Are they in alphabetical order? Or does it come under F for Forces of the Abyss? Yes, I think. There's Empire of Dust. Why can't I find the Abyssal list? Maybe it's in the index at the start. You know, I could have just wound back the video by this point. Okay, army lists. Forces of the Abyss, page 180. Okay, onto the Abyss page. Where is Cronius? Cronius, -18. -18, defense 5, yes. So, I'd be charging into his flank with 18 attacks on 3s and then 2s re-rolling 1s. So, 18 attacks, hitting on 3s, probably get 12 hits. With Vicious, I should probably convert 11 of those into wounds, I would say. On average. I'd be surprised if I lost more than that. And then I would need 7 to kill him. So I think the odds are too chancy for that to have been bait. I don't think it's... I think having Vicious really swings it in the favour of the Charger in that situation. So I don't think he would have done it intentionally. But you never know, that's just my opinion. So, Bael decides, you know what, it's time to start thinking about scoring, so it's going to head over towards this objective. And I'm obviously going to have to try and score myself. So it's going well for me killing-wise. Scenario-wise, it's still very dicey because my opponent has got faster manoeuvrable units than I have, so can get to objectives. Let's see. Lazy Pirate, I can't understand why your opponent placed his 2-point objective where he did and then didn't put anything over that table except his flyers. Again, I think there is some bluffing involved in this scenario, though. So I kind of did a similar thing, but I did have more substantial units with the golems over there. So you kind of don't want to give away where you've put the expensive token either. But then in this one, you do have half the game to figure it out. To figure out how to get to it, because it pops up halfway into the game. So, more damage being dished out here. The Overmaster, who has been regenerating, has taken more damage. The Grotesques take some damage, but they get double wand. It's not really a true double wand, because they're only up to 13. So it's not a mega double wand, but they're still double wand. So they're still alive, after double wanding the Succubi, so that kind of makes up for it. And, right, you're about to see a really weird move, and as I was going through the pictures, I thought, how on earth did this happen? And then I actually remembered, so I'll explain it to you. See where these golems are here? They're currently facing that 2-point objective. And we go into turn 5, the first picture shows them up here, on the 2-point objective. So they've gone from there to there. So, that, like, boggled my mind when I first saw that, when I was going through the pictures, and then I remembered exactly what happened. So in my turn, what they did was, they turned to face this unit here, because I was going to surge them into the flank of the Tortured Souls. And then I started doing maths, working out which objectives I needed to win the game. And I decided, you know what, that one's actually more important, because none of the enemies are fast enough and manoeuvrable enough to get to this one. Because the Tortured Souls aren't, I don't think they're nimble, so they can't get to this one. Bael isn't fast enough to get to this one. So all I need to do is take that one, and I will essentially win the game. So the golems, I then decided, you know what, I'm not going to surge into the flank here, I'll put them back where they were, but forgetting I'd actually moved them down the hill, I actually put them back in the spot they were in the previous turn, which is here, on the hill, when they were fighting there. So I just turned them and moved them this way. So obviously that's a mistake, but I was looking through it last night and I was thinking, oh my god, is that like a potential cheat moment where like that's going to take me from a loss into a win or something? So I was going through the different likely outcomes of what was going to happen if they'd moved legally. So what they're supposed to do is turn to face exactly 90 degrees that way, move 5 inches there, and then in the next turn, because it's only turn 5, they then turn 90 degrees and move that way to get within 3 inches of this token. So they can do it in 2 turns rather than 1. And then I was thinking, but if they need to do it in 2 turns, couldn't Bael fly over here and block them off to stop them getting to it? However, after deeply analysing the footage, I realised, okay, actually Bael can't do that because Susan charged into Bael this turn and disordered him. So he loses fly and nimble. So he wouldn't be able to turn round and go this way. At best, he would be able to go backwards 5 inches if he's speed 10, which would have meant he could get onto... I don't think he's... not even speed 10 is he, Bael? So he could have gone backwards just far enough to get onto this objective, I think. But obviously, if he'd done that, he wouldn't be able to box them in, so they would be able to do this over 2 turns and get to within range of it. So thankfully, this blatant illegal move wasn't necessary for them scoring. Thankfully, because of Susan doing that. There's also a really weird move here that's illegal. So the Overmaster gets onto the hill, because I wanted him to be within inspiring range of that unit. And then, I, for some reason, then decided, oh, actually, I would like to surge this unit, but he's already moved at the double, so he shouldn't have been able to do that. But thankfully, again, this doesn't change anything because they didn't make it into combat or anything, so they're just kind of sitting there. They're not in a position where their positioning is going to affect the game. So thankfully, again, that brain-melting moment, which has been captured on camera, embarrassingly, hasn't affected the game. On to turn 6. So as it stands at the moment, I've got this objective, even though they technically should be here and have to claim it next turn. I claim I own this one, which is going to be very difficult to take away, because I've wiped out this whole area now. This one here is probably going to my opponent, because the Horde is on it. This one here, my opponent is going to move this demon onto it. This fiend is going to go onto that objective, but I'm going to be able to contest that one, because the greater golem is going to be able to charge the fiend and be within 3 inches of it, so they've got 1 unit strength each on it, so that one's going to count for nothing. So I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, and my opponent's going to have 1. So that's the theory. If my opponent does some serious kills in this turn, could potentially swing it, he would have to kill both these units to change anything. So Bale has the flank into this one, so could potentially kill them. And this one could be hit by the Tortured Souls who can see over the hill. These guys can also be hit by the Tortured Souls in the rear, but they're not wounded at all, and the Tortured Souls are devastated. So even with a rear attack, I think they would be down to 12 attacks, I think, because you reduce their attacks characteristic by half, rounding down, so they'd go down to 4 attacks. And then they would be hitting on 4s, so they'd get 6, and then they'd be wounding on 4s, so they'd probably get 3. Which isn't enough to even roll a nerve check. So they decide they're not going to try and kill that unit, and they're just going to try and pick up points for kill points to try and get more tournament points and try and kill the Overmaster instead. So they get charged by the they charge the Overmaster, don't quite kill him. Bale charges in the flank there. The Grotesques looks like get wavered. And the Overmaster gets wavered as well. These guys take some more wounds, but they don't die. And the Ironcaster gets wavered. So, how could it have gone badly wrong here? If the Tortured Souls killed the Ironcaster, then overran 6 inches and hit this unit and killed them, potentially, but they have so few attacks, maybe they wouldn't do it. And if that unit had also died, Bale would have taken this objective, which would have turned it into a drawing situation. But as it is, I'm going into turn 6 knowing I've already won. So these golems just don't have to do anything because they're already there. But obviously, what they should have been doing this turn is moving from here to legally into that position to claim it. And this guy, the Greater Obsidian Golem, charges into the Fiend and contests that one. So it's going to end with a 3-1 win and bum 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 bum. First place. So very exciting to get a first place trophy. It's actually the first time I've finished first in a Kings of War event for a few years now, because the 2 crowns I won were for best overall. So purely for gaming score, at both those events where I got the crowns, I technically finished second in the rankings on the official Kings of War rankings, but I finished first overall with painting scores and sportsmanship added. So that's what the crowns were for. So they're technically second place trophies. So this is only the second real legitimate first place trophy for Kings of War that I've got. So very, very pleased with that. And I also feel like the Night Stalkers, they're a lot of fun, but I don't think they're as strong as the Abyssal Dwarfs. And I noticed a huge difference. All these games, I felt like my army was very strong. It felt, obviously I know how to play it because I've played it a lot. And there were other Abyssal Dwarf armies there, obviously, that didn't win the tournament. But I feel like having all that defense 6 with hard-hitting units, when my units get hit, they weren't dying. When I hit enemy units, they were dying, was the general gist I got from the day. Which has not been the case with Night Stalkers, where most of the time, you hit something with Night Stalkers, they don't die. So that's partly down to my model collection for Night Stalkers. If I had, for example, more Butchers, they actually hit just as hard as Obsidian Golems. So I only have 1 unit of Butchers in my Night Stalkers though. So the 3 Golem Hordes worked really well. And even if you kill one of them, there's still 2 left, which is a big threat, which is what I found when I've run Trolls as well, who also have the same hitting power. I suppose actually the Butchers and the Trolls do lack Vicious, so they don't hit quite as hard. And that is actually a big deal for a unit that hits on 4s. because hitting on 4s, you're not actually getting that many hits out of 18 attacks. On average, you're only getting 9. So if you're against a unit where you're wounding on 2s, re-rolling 1s, suddenly you're very likely to convert all of those into wounds rather than just a lot of them. So it does actually make a big difference, that vicious on them. So Lesser Obsidian Golems are just a really, really good unit. And you kind of have to pay a tax if you want to take an Ironcaster with them to surge them. But I didn't actually use surging a lot in this event. He was mostly there just inspiring them. And you've always got Surge as an option, so it plays on your opponent's mind. So you're paying that 90 points for a Surge caster to inspire, and even if you don't use it, you're paying to make your opponent make maybe suboptimal moves compared to what they would normally do because they're worried about you having the Surge opportunity. I think Susan and the Overmaster did very well for their role, giving me some hard-hitting speed. Susan's really good at going after like Ogre Boomers, as we saw, or dealing with chaff. You can clear that out very easily, and being individual, it doesn't matter which way she's facing, she can pretty much do whatever she wants. The 2 troops of gargoyles were really good as well. Really good roadblocks with no real limitation to where they can go because they're so fast. And nimble, of course. So really like gargoyles, some of the best chaff in the game, some of the cheapest as well. And very, very nice. And let's see, Lazy Pirate, the flyers would be better used as a reaction force, I would have thought. Yeah, so I think if we go back, let's go right back to the beginning of the game and look at deployment while we're talking about this. So, obviously the turning point is Cronius being killed. I think that's a big deal. But if we go right back to the wide shot. Hold on, even further than that. Almost there. There we go. So there's the wide shot for this game. Now, with hindsight, we know there's a 2-point objective there and there. I know this one's here, which is why I've got golems and gargoyles on this side, because I know that if I have to gun for that one, I've got a strong unit that can get to it. Susan was mainly there as a threat, and I didn't want to put a big bulk of a force here, because that might be the only objective over there that's any use. This one might be 0, this one might be 0, so I just want to be in a position to get to that one. Everything else, like I said, this is the main area you want to score in, because I knew there was a 1 point there. For all I knew, there could have been a 2-pointer in any of these, so I wanted to be mostly in this sort of area between all the tokens, which is where I was fighting most of the time. I ended up fighting kind of in that sort of area, mostly. And then there was this separate flank fight going on down here as well. But what you were saying about the flank force there, so Tortured Souls, Bael, and the Gargoyles, I do agree, actually, the Gargoyles would have been better served protecting something else, probably. I'm not sure the Tortured Souls really want Gargoyle protection. Whether the Tortured Souls were just worried about being one-shot by Susan, that is a possibility. But I do think they could have, if you just don't put the Tortured Souls near Susan, and maybe use them, stick them behind something as kind of a second wave of attack, because they do a few wounds, so a golem unit that's taken a few wounds, they would be a threat. Yeah, there is a lot of flying stuff over on this side when there's a 2-point objective there, but maybe, because of the speed that was put over here, maybe my opponent was thinking, actually, the 2-point objective's so far away that I actually want fast units over here so they can be the ones to get on it. So maybe that's the thinking there. My army was very compact into this big block. My opponent's army, these two, didn't get into the game for a little while because the thing that they were facing off with flew away to attack the centre when an opportunity came up. So it took them a little while to get in. And if the Grotesques hadn't double wand on the Succubus unit, then they would have been in a decent position to turn around and absorb that double charge as well. As it was, they ended up taking loads of damage from it though. Even though they got double wand as well, so it didn't make that much of a difference. In the middle, this little block I think was fine. They did alright, they did their bits of chip damage. They didn't roll that amazingly on their shooting, but you are against defense 6, so it's always going to be tricky. And they did probably the right thing, just moving backwards slightly each time to stay out of charge range until eventually I was able to hit them. That is the kind of unit that Susan would like to hit, but because all the flyers were over there, that actually drew Susan out to this side because I felt she had to deal with them. And she did a good job tying up that whole flank force for a little bit. And then when they eventually came down here, I was able to surge into the flank of the Tortured Souls and double one them, obviously, but you can't account for that. So, that, I think I got good value out of Susan, killing the gargoyles, being a bit of a distraction, then getting round the back and going after the flame bearers. Lazy Pirate, I would have put his stuff from the other flank over his 2-point objective, backed up by the gargoyles. The Abyssal Fiend is a real threat. These two. Yeah, that's a possibility. Put some more hard-hitting stuff over there with the gargoyles if you need someone to swoop over onto the objective at the end. Yeah, because these units aren't the most powerful ones. If we look at the power that's put in the expensive set part of the table, nothing over here is fast enough to reach this token. So these are the only units that are ever going to be able to fight for this one. Whereas I've got my 2-pointer there, which is much closer. So anything from kind of this area can potentially get to that one by the end of the game. These gargoyles certainly can as well. So I've definitely got a lot more options to reach the one that I know is a 2-point objective. It is a weird scenario though, and on game 4, I think they were drawn randomly for this tournament, which is a fair enough way to do it, but if you're picking the scenarios beforehand, I don't think many people would pick this for game 4 of a one-day event. It is a bit mind-boggling at times. It's not as bad as Smoke and Mirrors, which is the one where you have to reveal 1 token per turn. That one would be a total nightmare in round 4. This one not bad. Usually tournaments, when they're picking the scenarios beforehand, they would usually go with something like Dominate or Control for round 4, once everyone's brain's melted. I think I'm one of those fortunate people that I kind of get energised the more games I play throughout the day. Although saying that, I did do those 2 really silly illegal move blunders in the last turn. So maybe my brain was melting as well, for a change. But overall, very happy with that tournament, obviously. Nice win, 4 nice wins against some tough opponents. And this was a tough game. The one against the Ogres, the game 3 against the Ogres was really tough scenario-wise against that army list. So I had to rely on a little bit of luck, and my solid core just held, and then was able to kill just enough ogre units by the end of the game. This game, even though it was super tight on the scoring, I killed tons and I only lost 3 units, I think. I think I lost the gargoyles and the hexcaster. I think that's all that died in this game, which is really weird to think about, because everything was in combat. Yeah, so the golems, they had a pretty free ride. They didn't get attacked by anything too scary for most of the game. The grotesques obviously should have died. They got double one. The greater golem, he was still chilling down here at the end. Overmaster was up here. So yeah, I barely lost anything. It was a very cagey game. My opponent did say that he was playing it very cagey. Wasn't that confident in killing my units, so he was focused more on just trying to play the scenario. So I did end up with a lot of points for the game as well. So lots of kills, lots of points, and a trophy. And there was actually a £20 voucher as well for Black Dragon Miniatures, which is where this took place. And I got an Age of Sigmar, a little Caradron Overlords character. Because that is an army that I'm not exactly working on, but I should be working on it. They just got a new book. So I should probably finish painting the ships for them so I can actually play them. As far as Kings of War, what am I working on? I could be working on ogres if I choose to, but I'm not really working on them at the moment. So they're definitely in the queue. And what am I taking to the next event? Will I just take this army again? The next tournament, I think, is maybe 5 points less than this, so I wouldn't have to change much at all. If I wanted to take this, I would have to probably just drop the Boots of Striding from the Grotesques and give them something else, probably. So I could just take this list again. Normally when I win a tournament, I don't take the same list next time, because I've already proved, okay, this list works, I can play it well, I've won, let's do something different. That's how I usually roll. So you won't normally see me winning back-to-back tournaments, because I like to mix up my list after I've done well with it. So for example, the Dead Zone tournament coming up next week, I'm not taking the same list that I just won with last time. I'm probably going to take Forge Fathers to that. So, do I take Abyssal Dwarfs again? Do I take a drastically different list? Do I put the Hellfane in? I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I do maybe limit my competitive potential by changing up my list so much. Once I've done well with it, once I've had a really good performance, I usually change my list. So maybe I'll just run the same thing again and see if I could do well at another tournament. Don't know what I would change if I was going to change anything. If we were going up to 2,300 points, which a lot of the tournaments are, then what would I do to this list with an extra 300 points? I could maybe put in some half-breed cavalry and a half-breed champion. I could probably fit both of those in with 300 points. They'd be a decent hard-hitting addition. I could put in Hellfane, which would be even more defense 6. So kind of doubling down on how the army already works. I wouldn't put mortars in, I don't really rate them anymore, they usually let you down. If you want to finish mid-table, mortars are usually okay because you'll have a couple of games where they'll just destroy things left and right, and then a couple of games where they hit absolutely nothing. So I'm not a big fan of war machines anymore. What else? That's only when you're taking 3, by the way. If you just take 1, I don't feel like they do enough now. They don't do enough damage. Before, it used to be when they hit, things die, even with just 1, because they used to do a lot more damage when they did hit. What else have I got? I've got a grotesque champion, I've got loads of infantry, I've got decimators that never seem to get used, because I don't think they've been really in my favour for some time. I've got Black Souls or Immortal Guard. Immortal Guard regiments usually complement this army quite well because they have high defense and they're unwaverable as well. So they're usually a good complement to the golems if you want to double down on that play style. I don't know. I like the Overmaster, even though I know he's not the real competitive choice. But the big flyer does really help this list, I think. As you'll see, for example, in this game, nothing else in this army was going to have that level of threat projection and get halfway across the table and kill Cronius in one go. Susan can't do that. But the Ancient Winged Half-Breed certainly can. So it does add something significant to the list that you don't have if that comes out. So yeah, I do like this list. I would definitely recommend 3 Golem Hordes. Very strong, very powerful, very survivable. And I think it's about time to wrap this video up. So, next week, Dead Zone tournament, so I'll be reporting on that, of course. And then 2 weeks after that, there's another Kings of War tournament, so we'll see if I take the same thing to that. And then, I think 1 or 2 weeks after that, there is an Age of Sigmar tournament, which I'm hoping to have my giants, my Sons of Beermat, ready for that. I just need to finish painting one more mini giant, which I've actually got primed on the table at the moment, so that'll be exciting if I get that finished in time and take that army for the first time to an event. My calendar is quite full for the rest of the year. There's lots of events most months. I think June is a little bit light, but there's a lot in the other months. In the second half of the year, there are a lot of 2-dayer events. There's BritCon, there is Clash of Kings. For 1-day events, there's Battle Masters. And there's quite a few Age of Sigmar events that I'm booked in for later in the year as well, so quite busy, as usual. And yeah, so very enjoyable, and it's quite a hassle to actually get to this event, because I had to get the coach and then the bus, and I only just made the bus. I had 1 minute to spare when I got on the bus, off the coach. If the coach had been delayed, I would have missed the bus and had to get a very expensive Uber, probably. I did end up getting an Uber back to the coach station afterwards, because the tournament actually ran over by a little bit. So if I'd got the bus, then I would have missed the coach by a couple of minutes. And then an Uber from where the coach station was back to my house would have been drastically more expensive than an Uber from Black Dragon Miniatures to the middle of Leicester. which is where I needed to be. So I did end up spending more money on travel, but I think it's worth it for a trophy. And let's get that thumbnail back up and wrap this one up. So don't forget to like the video if you haven't already. Don't forget to check out all the links in the description, the social media, Twitter, Discord server, Facebook group, and the like. And obviously, if you feel like you learn something from these videos, if you feel like your tournament performances and your overall gaming acumen is being boosted, you can feel your wargaming brain growing within your skull with every word that comes out of my mouth and every tactical nugget that's being spoon-fed to you, then why not go and pledge all your life savings on the Patreon? Because really, what are you going to spend it on anyway? You're better off just giving it all to me so that I can attend all the tournaments in the world. I think that's fair. Okay. That's the end of that. All that remains to be said is... good night out there, whatever you are.